Now, here's goes directly to your question as to how much vitamin C does a human being really need. A 150-pound goat, uh, and I'm not talking about greatest of all time, I'm just talking about goat. uh, a 150-pound goat will make 7, 8, 9,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C. And here's the other thing, directly secreted into the blood. So we're not talking about taking a supplement that you absorb 5% of or 15% of or 20% of and finally makes it inside your body. I mean, that would be an enormous amount of oral supplementation of just about any type of vitamin C to actually have a delivery of 7, 8, or 9, 10 grams into your blood. Now you combine with that the fact that vitamin C is part of your stress response. You know, when you hit an animal or human being as well with a large amount of stress, the adrenal glands secrete cortisol, and the animals make vitamin C. That's because cortisol pushes vitamin C inside the cell. But the point being is the amounts. The higher the stress level gets, the more the liver, if there's adequate glucose substrate to turn into vitamin C, will make vitamin C. And they've shown that the same goat that makes a baseline amount of vitamin C of 6, 7, 8,000 milligrams will start making 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 grams in the course of a day, all to neutralize that new toxin or that new infectious exposure. So, meaning, of course, that even when we're quote unquote well supplemented, we're still far below the needs that our body really has for vitamin C.
Hello, Dr. Levy. You are a researcher of orthomolecular medicine and also the author of 13 books. So welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here, Richard.
So, Dr. Levy, one of your main areas of research and work has been in vitamin C, right? Which is one of the core vitamins, if not the core vitamin. So if we just kind of start at the beginning with vitamin C, what is the core function of vitamin C that it plays in humans?
Well, to best appreciate the function of vitamin C is to first appreciate what disease is. And quite simply, all disease is increased oxidative stress or increased numbers of biomolecules inside your cells that are in an electron depleted, oxidized, non-functional state. Now, this oxidative stress doesn't cause some other condition. It is a condition. And that's the important thing to remember is all disease is a unique variety and array of different biomolecules in different locations, in different concentrations, being in a dysfunctional or non-functional oxidized state. And by losing that normal function, that determines the specific disease pattern. So where does the role come in for vitamin C? Vitamin C redistributes and donates electrons. So vitamin C can come along and donate electrons to oxidized biomolecules and restore them to normal. Then you combine with that, one might ask the question, then what causes the oxidation of these biomolecules in the first place? And the answer is quite simple. And there's only one word. It's called toxins. All toxins oxidize, or all toxins cause their damage by oxidizing biomolecules. If it doesn't oxidize a biomolecule, it's not a toxin and it doesn't have a toxic impact. So these definitions of toxin, biomolecule, oxidation, and the role that vitamin C does in reversing oxidation, and also if the vitamin C can meet the toxin in the blood before the toxin has a chance to oxidize a biomolecule, vitamin C can directly give an electron to the toxin and quench it before it has any toxic effect in the tissues. So that makes vitamin C the incredibly pivotal and important material that it is, because it has been shown very nicely that there's really not a single toxin overdose or toxin exposure, unless somebody's 3 minutes away from dying, that vitamin C adequately dosed will come in and completely resolve and prevent that person from perishing. And this I puzzled me many, many years ago, 30 years ago, because I knew that vitamin C would do this, and it didn't matter what the toxin was. And I said, how can vitamin C neutralize or completely negate the impact of thousands upon thousands of different molecules, different chemical nature, all this sort of thing? How could one simple molecule do that? And the only conceivable answer was really what I just said, is that all the toxins had to have a final common denominator of delivering their toxicity. And that final common denominator is to cause the oxidation or the electron depletion of a biomolecule, which vitamin C can very effectively counteract.
But not all oxidation is related to toxins, right? So the
Yes.
mitochondria.
Yes, all oxidation. You see, a pro-oxidant is toxic. All right, there's synonyms. Toxin equal pro-oxidant equal radical oxygen species equal free radical equal poison. They all mean the same thing. So if a toxic or if a negative effect is being impacted, whether in the mitochondria or elsewhere, is because you might not want to label it a toxin, but what's happening is a substance is causing the oxidation of something that should not be oxidized.
Okay, but it's internally generated. At least it can be in the.
Oh yeah, no, your toxins come from the outside. You can generate them. The most common source inside the body is infections. Chronic infections generate enormous amounts of toxins. Heavy metal accumulations, the persistent spike protein. Now that we've had the delightful pandemic, completely poisoned so many people for the rest of their miserable lives. And so there's a lot of different sources of toxins, but they all have this same final common denominator. And they get confused a lot because of the fact that many people don't appreciate all the synonyms that you have for a toxin.
Okay. So vitamin C is therefore working as an antioxidant. I mean,
sure.
Does it have other functions as well as being an antioxidant?
Well, the interesting thing is if you go up several layers of the onion rather than down, if you go up several layers of the onion, it having a powerful antioxidant impact keeps biomolecules normal and allows normal functioning. So in that regard, keeping something from going into the oxidized state, keeping this metabolic pathway from having biomolecules that are oxidized, all of these things impact the other functions that vitamin C has. But I tell you what, after playing 30 years with this molecule, I'm going to tell you at the molecular level, it's really this antioxidant activity, but in a certain defined spot, a certain metabolic pathway, one biomolecule here, another biomolecule here. That's ultimately what determines its function. I mean, we know, for example, in the literature that vitamin C powerfully impacts and promotes immune function by at least 20 different, I won't say mechanisms, but different phenomena. It stimulates antibody production. It stimulates B cell and T cell formation, natural killer cells. But I'm going to tell you, when you go down several layers of the onion, you're going to find that it's just vitamin C playing a supportive, nurturing role in keeping the molecules that need to be interacting in a reduced state.
Okay. So there's different types of antioxidant, right?
Sure.
We have, but basically we can split them into fat soluble and water soluble. Is that a good division?
There's more categories than that, but that's an important category. For example, you have, what makes vitamin C so particularly unique among antioxidants? Number one, it's a small molecule. Number two, it's very similar to glucose because in the body of animals, it should be of us, but we lost it. You're converting glucose into vitamin C through a 4-enzyme sequence in the liver. So it's small molecule, very similar to glucose, will utilize the GLUT transport pathways, will be facilitated just like glucose by the effect of insulin to go inside the cell, also has energy dependent active transport mechanisms to bring it inside the cell, uh, delivers potentially 2 electrons per molecule rather than 1, also has an intermediate state called the ascorbyl radical, where ascorbate, which is vitamin C, donates 1 electron uh, and is in a 1 electron depleted state, and that's called the ascorbyl radical. And now that it turns out to be an incredibly stable chemical species that can circulate throughout the body. And depending on the microenvironment that it encounters, it can donate another electron or it could take an electron away. And then finally, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. You have the ultimate deficiency syndrome. When you don't have enough vitamin C, you die of scurvy. Okay, so there's not a really there's other deficiency syndromes, but none as severe quite as scurvy. I mean, yeah, vitamin B3, you can get pellagra, certainly that'll kill you, but the most common ones are well known. For example, too, you're probably familiar with this rating system they have for antioxidants called ORAC, oxygen radical absorption capacity. And then they, in an attempt to, in my opinion, sell supplements, they try to not only compare their products to vitamin C, but they try to denigrate vitamin C. For example, you'll see lots of advertisements that say, take astaxanthin, which is a fat-soluble antioxidant. It's 6,000 times more powerful than vitamin C on the ORAC score. Well, that may be true, but it just depends on what the test is measuring. And I'll make it really simple. Nobody has ever died from an astaxanthin deficiency. You will die from a vitamin C deficiency. So that right away shows you the shenanigans that they're pulling by trying to make equivalents. Now, having said that, if you have eye problems, oxidative stress in your eyes, astaxanthin is a great supplement. I'm not telling you it's not a good supplement, but it's not even remotely a substitute for vitamin C.
Yes, because I see that, I mean, the fat soluble ones are protecting the membranes mostly.
Right. Very prominently the cell membranes, yes. Vitamin E is another prominent cell membrane protector because of its potent antioxidant and fat soluble qualities, yes.
Okay, so the water soluble antioxidants are, I guess, in the cytosol, and they're protecting against
mostly in the cytosol, but throughout the body. I mean, your extracellular spaces are not devoid of biomolecules and antioxidants and toxins. They're just not at the concentration level that you find in cells. And I think the point is probably well taken that even though you might have abnormalities physiologically in your extracellular space, it's predominantly the cytoplasm and the intercellular space that counts when you're talking about causing disease, preventing disease, resolving disease. It's dealing with the biomolecules inside the cell and their important interactions.
So we're talking about scurvy.
Yeah.
So is scurvy just a lack of the antioxidant capability of vitamin C? I mean, could you cure scurvy with a different antioxidant, or it has to be vitamin C? Well, I mean, I guess
that's
why.
That's a very interesting point. Very interesting point. The honest answer is I don't know, but I will tell you this. For about the last 2 years, I've been working with methyleneblue, which is an incredibly powerful antioxidant, tiny molecule. It just about parallels all the different things that vitamin C does because of its ability to access all the tissues very easily, donate electrons, keep the electron pool distributed. My hypothesis, and like I said, it's fascinating that you asked that question, is I think there would be an excellent chance. I can't say until it's done, but I think there would be an excellent chance that if you had a guinea pig dying of scurvy, you could save it with methyleneblue. So now would it be a perfect replacement? No, but I think it would bring and distribute enough antioxidant power throughout the body of that animal that it would no longer die of scurvy. So I see where you're coming from, and it's a great question, but it's up in the air. We don't know. It'd be a very, very, very interesting research project. It shouldn't be that difficult for researchers that are already in the animal research area. It would be pretty easy to do.
But it would have to be a guinea pig because they don't have the vitamin C
Right,
gene.
correct, right. No.
Yeah, like
I mean,
a
rats
mouse
and
would-
mice actually make enormous amounts of vitamin C, and it's one of the basic flaws in so many vitamin C studies when they use rats and mice rather than guinea pigs, is because you always have to layer into consideration that whatever arbitrary situation you're setting up research wise, it's in an animal that's making its own vitamin C. Yes.
Okay. Before we leave antioxidants, does it help to have a mix of like water soluble antioxidants? I mean, having a vitamin C and, well, I'm trying to think of what other ones there are, but there are other ones.
It's an excellent point. I make that point very frequently. Is you're healthiest when, of course, you have optimal levels of vitamin C and you have a wide array. I call it the antioxidant matrix. Okay. All the different antioxidants in their oxidized state, in their reduced state, continually interact with each other, shuttle electrons back and forth, and basically optimize the distribution of the electron pool. One of the misconceptions about vitamin C for many years was that it's a primary donor of electrons. In other words, it's bringing new electrons in. That's not really the case, because when we give oxidized antioxidants, when we give vitamin C in its oxidized state, methylene blue is in its oxidized state, it works just as well. So the point is all your new electrons come in from your diet. So it's kind of like you have a widget factory. You're making 1 million widgets a day, but you only have 2 delivery trucks. Okay, well, the widgets aren't going to get where they need to go. But here's the case where you have an extraordinarily good diet, but not much vitamin C. It's not going to do you that much good, because you need a continual distribution of the electrons throughout the cells. This is what generates measurable microcurrents inside the cytoplasm, and those microcurrents generate legitimate transmembrane voltages, which have been well researched to show that, I think it's when you're like 40 microvolts or above a certain level, you got a healthy cell. When it starts dropping below that, you don't, which again is just another reflection of the relative toxin load versus antioxidant load that you have inside the cell.
Does vitamin C get into the mitochondria?
Sure, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's working there. So there was, I believe, a paper that showed that like vitamin C and vitamin E together as antioxidants reduced the impact of, reduced the beneficial effect of exercise. Am I remembering that right? And are you aware of that paper?
They've had some, this specific paper, no, but they've had some studies that when they try to, shall I say, microanalyze them, I don't know. They say, oh, well, vitamin C at this metabolic level inhibits this, which is causing some increased oxidative stress. Therefore, the fact that you see this in exercise means it's having a negative effect. My personal opinion is you have macro studies and you have micro studies. By that I mean a macro study is, and they have them, when you keep your vitamin C levels high enough in your blood, you have a decreased all-cause mortality. You have a decreased chance of death from anything. Now, on the other hand, when you're not even looking at the lifespan of the body, the lifespan of the organism, the lifespan of the microbe, and you're looking at individual impacts that vitamin C or other things might have on certain enzymes or certain metabolic pathways, well, it's good information, but you can't be extrapolating that to how well it is for the body. how well it is for the intact organism.
Yes.
In other words,
Okay.
exercise is good for you. Vitamin C. Vitamin C is at a certain time in my life where I was taking large doses of vitamin C because my laboratory, I'd get IVs all the time, and I was doing a lot of weightlifting, and I built a muscle mass that I couldn't have come close to otherwise. So, but that's as they say, an N of one.
If we think about dosing, so where do you get vitamin C from, right? So basically, we don't make it ourselves.
We should make it ourselves, and a few people do, but yes, you're basically right.
Okay. Actually, I heard you say somewhere on another cast that with certain supplements may make epigenetic changes that allow you to make it yourself.
That's correct. Hydroxytyrosol has a high concentration in olive leaf extract, and a very simple, straightforward paper where they gave young volunteers 50 milligrams of hydroxytyrosol a day, and in 2 weeks, they had doubled their circulating vitamin C levels. And then when you start doing the research on the fact that we have the first three enzymes intact, but we're missing a completely normal functioning L-galonolactone oxidase, which is the final enzyme, then we start realizing, and I'll tell you why in a moment, that we're not dealing with a genetic defect. We're dealing with an epigenetic defect. So we're not dealing with the loss of the code. We're dealing with a defect in the transcription of the code, the messenger RNA producing the final protein that would allow the formation of the vitamin C. And a lot of this is due to the fact that babies make their own vitamin C. They just lose it after a while. So this directly implies, at least, that living in this toxic cesspool of a planet now, most of us are, well, not most of us, all of us are forced to live in. There are unique toxins. Remember, thousands of different toxins out there. And I would speculate that this is obviously a very common toxin that, because of the way situations are set up, nearly all of us cannot avoid. So after a few months or a year or two, we start to overload the galonolactone oxidase enzyme in our livers. And if we don't stop making vitamin C, we either make very little or we make chemically incomplete vitamin C that doesn't do the job. Okay. On the other hand, we also have documented, I don't know what the percentage is. I'm going to say probably less than 5%, but still, when you're looking at a large population, that's still going to be a lot of people, do make their own vitamin C, and you can document it. A lot of this can account for the fact is, how is it grandpa is 90 years old and been smoking 10 cigars all his life a day, and this, that, and the other, and he's doing fine. And so you have a lot of these survival stories.
So where do we get our vitamin C from? So we can get some from diet. Like how much should we have per day? I saw the RDA is actually only like 90 milligrams for
yeah. Well, the RDA there stands for ridiculous, ridiculous dietary allowance. I mean, you got to remember this, Richard. Who determines all this? This is a whole bunch of people who aren't especially intelligent, who are not really well read on the literature, politically get elected to a committee, and the committee sits there and votes on it. I mean, what kind of science is that? I mean, that's all those RDRs are, a bunch of old hacks finding a number, getting impatient to take off the lunch, and they vote on it, and that becomes something extra. So no, it's ridiculous. As far as to what we need, I go back to what I just said. We also have the examples that in nature, most wild animals make their own vitamin C. They have the fourth enzyme intact, and they make their own vitamin C very well. And they've done studies that have looked at different animals as to how much they make. Now, goes directly to your question as to how much vitamin C does a human being really need. A 150-pound goat, and I'm not talking about greatest of all time, I'm just talking about goat. A 150-pound goat will make 7, 8, 9,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C. And here's the other thing, directly secreted into the blood. So we're not talking about taking a supplement that you absorb 5% of or 15% of or 20% of and finally makes it inside your body. I mean, that would be an enormous amount of oral supplementation of just about any type of vitamin C to actually have a delivery of 7, 8, or 9, 10 grams into your blood. Now you combine with that the fact that vitamin C is part of your stress response. You know, when you hit an animal or human being as well with a large amount of stress, the adrenal glands secrete cortisol, and the animals make vitamin C. That's because cortisol pushes vitamin C inside the cell. But the point being is the amounts. The higher the stress level gets, the more the liver, if there's adequate glucose substrate to turn into vitamin C, will make vitamin C. And they've shown that the same goat that makes a baseline amount of vitamin C of 6, 7, 8,000 milligrams will start making 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 grams in the course of a day, all to neutralize that new toxin or that new infectious exposure. So, meaning, of course, that even when we're quote unquote well supplemented, we're still far below the needs that our body really has for vitamin C because of the loss of the ability to directly make it and push it into the bloodstream on demand, which is the case of the wild animals. I might add something else too, is that, and I've written about this, and I think it's a very important thing in the context of what we're talking about here, is that we talk about the stress response. The stress, everybody talks about stress response, make a lot of cortisol. Okay, you know, cortisol reaction to stress. And that begs the question, well, what is the cortisol doing? Well, the cortisol is doing two primary things. Number one is it's meeting vitamin C in the blood that the liver should be making, but in the case of the human, it's not, that it should be making, because the primary role of cortisol, again, this is not recognized. The primary goal of cortisol is to push vitamin C inside the cell, and that determines the health of a cell. When you get vitamin C levels inside a cell to normal levels, you got a normal cell. Now, what else is happening at the same time is what we do have is excess glucose. Now, remember, I said that vitamin C is made from the glucose stores. Well, in order to keep a reaction going, you need to keep supplying substrates, right? Basic chemistry. You got to keep it going, you got to keep on giving the fuel. Well, guess what cortisol also does? It's gluconeogenesis. So the role of cortisol, the moment it gets into your blood, is to start breaking down protein and making more glucose to fuel that reaction in the liver to make vitamin C. And this is why rather than have good healthy bodies, we have diabetic bodies instead, because we make cortisol in response to stress. We don't use up the glucose, and instead we make more. And this is probably the primary reason for the incredible epidemic of diabetes that we have across the planet. As we like to say, somewhat snidely, you don't see many wild animals in the wild injecting themselves with insulin, do you?
No.
No.
No. Okay, so if I'm a healthy person, but potentially older, like 50, 60, what would a sensible vitamin C protocol look like?
Well, if you're going to take regular vitamin C, regular is just ascorbic acid, sodium ascorbate. Something your best way to dose that, it's more difficult to stick to it, but because of the quick absorption and quick excretion, it's better to take it in intermittent dosing throughout the day. So, in my opinion, based on everything I've studied, read, and witnessed, and the thing I tell you, I think most people should be on at least 6 grams a day in divided doses. So, or 9. So here's a good way to look at it: 1 to 3 grams of vitamin C 3 times a day. So that way you end up with, depending on your own unique sensitivity, a few very rare people have tremendous bowel sensitivity on even a tiny dose of vitamin C. But so if you have that, well, then all bets are off. We have to work on something else. But if you have normal bowel sensitivity, and depending on your body size, you're looking at 3 to 9 grams total a day. And that's, again, that's not etched in stone. And obviously somebody who is very sick, very toxic, a lot of infectious agents. You may or may not have heard that some people can take 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 grams of vitamin C orally and never induce the osmotic diarrhea. In other words, it all gets absorbed very well because the body needs it so badly. But that's not a reliable enough occurrence to hang your hat on. You still want to try to get in most people somewhere, again, like I said, between 3 and 9 grams a day. But if you see that they're sick, the more the better. All right. Now, having said that, we have a form of vitamin C called liposome encapsulated. All right. The liposome encapsulated was originated by Live On Labs in the United States 20 years ago. They had such a phenomenal success that so many supplement companies have tried to jump on the bandwagon, and they're quite frankly fraudulent. I mean, they want to make the money, but they don't have any idea how to make a liposome, so they're just going to make them until they get shut down. I'm a consultant to Live On Labs. I became 18 years ago. I had no idea what a liposome was. They wanted me to work with them. I said, well, send me some product, and I had no interest at all in using it. And then I got sick with the flu. My clinic had been closed down, so I couldn't get my IV vitamin C like I usually do. I had taken about 10 grams of regular vitamin C to the point that I had extremely loose stools, so I couldn't take any more orally. And I remembered one thing that the company representative had told me. And again, I had no idea what a liposome was. He said, this has no bowel effect. It all gets absorbed. So I said, well, if that's true, I can take some more and it's not going to aggravate my bowels. And I took 5 grams orally, and in an hour, I felt better than I'd ever felt, even after taking a 50-gram IV infusion. And I said, this just doesn't make sense. And at that point in time, I said, well, I think it's about time you figure out what a liposome is, which I had no idea at the time. But anyway, the point being is when you have a legitimate, so I went to that big diversion because I don't want people to hear this and then just go on Amazon and see anything that says liposome, because it's not going to be liposomes. It's either Live On Labs here, or in Europe, it's called Altria.com. Anyway, I have found, and especially as we've seen vitamin C get more and more and more expensive, I mean, probably 10 or 15 years ago, you get yourself a nice 50-gram IV infusion for $100, $125, $150. Now you're seeing $300, $400, $500. It's really pricing itself out of existence. Well, as it turns out, when you take a good regular dose of the liposome, for example, the liposomes get fully absorbed, they get into your blood in the encapsulated state, and they go inside the cell without the consumption of energy. Even when you take it intravenously, because it's not encased inside a liposome, you need to consume energy to get it inside the cell. Yeah, I'm sure you realize when you get an energy delivering substance, you want to get it from point A to point B with as little further consumption of energy as possible. That's the whole dynamics of a biological system, if you will. And I've seen that when you dose this vigorously, you get results as good and superior to IV. So it's just something out there for people to hang their hat on. It is a more expensive form, but I'm telling you, most people can take 2 grams of this a day, and it's easily the equivalent of 10 grams of the regular oral vitamin C. So it's and you only need to take it once a day. You don't have to do this dosing every 4 or 5 hours, that sort of thing. So those are pretty much the options. And the final thing too is this is an individual thing. People want to know for themselves, of course. and we've been discussing this. How much should I take? Well, when somebody like is, let's say I call them a vitamin C virgin. Let's say, they're whatever their age is, they've never taken a vitamin C supplement before in their life. And they take either a big dose of regular vitamin C or they take 2 or 3 packets of the Live On Liposomal Vitamin C, and they start feeling so good. They see their vision is clear. There's a little more pep in their step. It's not like they felt sick before, but they didn't really feel pepped up. Then they develop what I call is they do health intuition. So they continue on that for whatever period of time, days, weeks, months, and then one day, they don't feel sick, but they don't feel on top of the world. That's where their intuition tells them that they're getting usually an infectious or toxic challenge. And unless they can get rid of it or identify it, the thing to do then is really max out your additional vitamin C dosing to knock that threat out before it becomes entrenched as an infection or a condition. And then the next day or so, they're back up to that really feeling the pep of their step again. That to me is a very little discussed, but also important thing to know about good supplement dosing is most people, not most people, everybody ultimately is at a certain level of health or sickness, if you will. And they get used to that. And so they get used to the fact that, well, if I'm not having a headache today, or if the headache is very mild, I'm in good shape. Well, of course not. You're not close to being in good shape, but that's what people adjust to. And so when you reset those expectations, people are able to much better take care of themselves.
Just going back to one question in there. So
Sure.
the liposomes make it into the blood intact. Does that seem to be
Absolutely,
correct?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Liposome, you've probably heard of exosomes. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
exosome.
Yeah.
Okay. An exosome is a extremely tiny intact particle that has a bilipid layer around it identical to the cell membrane inside the body. Now, even though it's man-made, it was made in the laboratory in the 1960s, the liposome was designed to be an artificial cell. And in that regard, you can consider a liposome a large exosome, basically. And perhaps you wondered, I wondered for a long time, how the hell does one cell in the body know what another cell remote from it is doing? We seem to have all this crosstalk, but nobody's ever really decided or described what is crosstalking. And I'm going to tell you, it's microscopic vesicles, usually exosomes, that are either delivering toxins or they're delivering stem cell nutrients. It goes both ways. Okay, they for a long time they were considered to be nature's garbage cans. They'd be just a way of getting rid of toxins. Obviously, they're far, far, far more important than that. As a matter of fact, I don't know that this is well known either at this point in time. Most of the time, the spike protein is encapsulated in an exosome, which again makes it especially diabolical and especially protected against being effectively eradicated. So anyway, consider the liposome to be a large exosome. And if you can get it into the body, which you can, in an unbroken up form circulating inside the blood, that liposome oftentimes is small enough so that it'll either pass through a pore in the cell or it'll hit the cell wall and then by a process called reverse pinocytosis, open up, emerge into the cell wall, and then allow the contents to enter inside. And it's just a phenomenal way of getting new and drugs too. The liposomes are initially designed, our medicine being what it is, to deliver doses of chemotherapy that were small enough to just affect the target cells, but not toxify the entire body. Anyway, I'm not big on chemotherapy of any type, but I'm just telling you historically, that's probably the main reason that liposomes came before. But since then, it's been shown that if you make them right, you can encapsulate just about anything inside them. Most of the time, you're encapsulating something water soluble inside, surrounded by the fat soluble cell membrane. You can, however, deliver fat soluble substances too. And what they do in these liposomes is you just integrate themselves into the cell membrane rather than be encapsulated inside the water soluble compartment.
You, before we leave vitamin C, so you said that you were doing like high dose vitamin C to help you with, I guess, well, just to help you keep you healthy, but also that it improved your physical performance. Could
Sure,
you,
absolutely.
yeah, could you talk a little bit about that? I mean,
Well, I
what kind
mean,
of
it
a
wasn't
protocol would you use? Yeah.
well, it wasn't a protocol. It's just me from one day to the next. I had a laboratory probably 3 times a week just for general health. I take a 50-gram vitamin C IV along with some of my buddies. This is 20 years ago, uh, and and so I was in a general state of good health. But there were several times, as fate would have it, that I might have had 3 days in a row of taking 50 grams. And like on those days, I remember one day, and for anybody who's lifted any weights to any degree at all, and I'm not by any means a professional weightlifter, but they will appreciate this comment, this perspective. After I did it for a number of days in a row, I'm going to say 3 or 4 days in a row, and then I went into the gym, and for different exercises, I found that on that day, my strength had gone up a full 50%. In other words, if the max that I could do was 10 reps, I could do 20. Okay, it blew my mind. I mean, it was like, where on earth is this strength coming from? I mean, I felt like the Hulk. Didn't look like the Hulk, uh, which wouldn't be bad except for being green, of course.
Yeah. Being green would be a bit troublesome. I saw that you talked about your top 8 supplements. So
Mm-hmm.
these are like the supplements that kind of everyone should be taking. And number one was, of course, vitamin C, right? But then like number two was magnesium and kind of its relationship with also with heavy metals, which I
Mm-hmm.
found was very interesting. So why magnesium as your number two?
Actually, uh, magnesium is the number one. I say
Oh,
that because obviously you want both, I'll say. But I'm going to say if you made the extremely arbitrary and ridiculous circumstance that you could only take one supplement, what would it be? It would have to be magnesium. Other antioxidants, like we talked about, the antioxidant matrix, they can partially compensate for a vitamin C deficiency. Nothing compensates for a magnesium deficiency other than magnesium. And this is important because a large number of diseases are primarily caused by magnesium deficiency, and all diseases are made worse by magnesium deficiency. So, if it's possible, magnesium is the single thing that's most depleted of anybody on the planet, and the thing that we need the most. Uh, and it has to do primarily with blocking the toxic effects of calcium. I wrote a book called Death by Calcium, and I later on wrote a book called Magnesium Reversing Disease. In retrospect, I should have called it Life by Magnesium, Death by Calcium, Life by Magnesium, because 100% of sick cells, okay, cells that are not healthy, all right, just to use a generic term, 100% of those cells have increased intracellular oxidative stress, always accompanied by and caused by, it's like a fine tune, elevated calcium levels inside your cell. Okay, always there. And when you're able to bring those calcium levels down, you bring the oxidative stress down through a number of different mechanisms. But the bottom line is calcium high, intracellular oxidative stress high, calcium super high, cellular death. Okay, so, and then all grades all the way down. Now, what magnesium does is it's nature's natural calcium channel blocker. You get calcium inside your cells through natural pathways across the cell wall called calcium channels. And we have a large number of prescription medicines that do this called calcium channel blockers. Verapamil, nifedipine, diltiazem. But the bottom line is we have one in nature that does it too, and it's magnesium. And just like those other drugs can bring the blood pressure down, if you have somebody on a high dose of magnesium, you can just dial it up until you bring their blood pressure down to zero, all because of the effect that it has on calcium. So many other drugs, many other nutrients have some degree of calcium channel blocking activity. And this is a major reason as to how beneficial some of those areas are. So the first four of what I call the Super 8 supplements are the calcium impacting supplements. Vitamin C, as you get vitamin C inside the cell, uh, oxidative stress comes down, calcium comes down. Number two, the real biggie is magnesium. I mean, you'll never get your calcium level inside your cells into a normal level as long as your magnesium levels stay low. Number three, vitamin D3, okay, is important in seeing that you get the amount of calcium that you need from your diet, but no excess. It regulates what you need to take from your diet, because I think I've probably implied, if not stated, the last thing on earth you want to do for your health is to take a calcium supplement. Never, 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 never. And then number four is vitamin K3, K2, excuse me. And this also has to do with mobilizing abnormal calcium deposits in your tissue where it shouldn't be, and getting them incorporated appropriately. So those are, and this is the interesting part too, Richard, is that each one of these four supplements, vitamin C, magnesium, vitamin D3, and vitamin K2, individually have been shown to decrease all-cause mortality. So right there, which means it's improving the health of every cell in the body, meaning there's no disease that it does not positively impact. And as I just said, the nature of all disease is the elevated calcium level inside it. So
we want to keep calcium down.
right.
Yeah. What? Yeah. How do we know whether we are low on magnesium or not? Is there? I mean, because I believe it's very difficult to actually test for
Right.
magnesium
You know
levels.
you're low on magnesium if you're on planet Earth and still alive. No,
Okay.
nobody has a normal magnesium level. A lot of them, 65%, 75%, 80%. No. Everyone is low on magnesium because the toxin debt is so high. We spend our entire life chasing our tails, trying to get up into a range that's as healthy as possible. But unfortunately, we never reach it. It's interesting that you bring this up, though, because something that I've come upon recently is it is covered in my book, but even covered better in an article that I've written, is that magnesium is your primary stabilizer of electrically active cells. So, in other words, if you have a neuron that gets irritable and shoots off, causes that has a low level of magnesium. Same thing with the heart. The heart is a sentinel organ for indicating magnesium deficiency. What do I mean by that? If you have any extra beats at all, you're magnesium deficiency. So really, and this kind of rocks people a little bit when they hear this, your best way to know that your magnesium level is either completely normal or acceptably normal is to have a Holter monitor test where they take all the heartbeats over 24 hours and you show no extra beats at all. If you show no extra beats at all, you've got a solid magnesium status throughout your body. On the other hand, and I'm a cardiologist, and I never knew all of this before, obviously, when you have lots of extra beats all over the place, then they start saying, well, don't drink alcohol, stop the caffeine, blah, blah, blah. Well, all those are aggravators, but they're not the causes. So yeah, too much alcohol or caffeine will further increase those extra beats. And then they'll finally say, well, there's too many, so we need to start you on drugs. Well, they don't need to start you on drugs. They need to optimize magnesium inside the cell, which when you're dealing with something that's critical, where you have the abnormal Holter, you need to go through a series of magnesium injections before you settle in on oral magnesium supplements. And once again, I actually had atrial fibrillation about a year ago. I couldn't believe it. Measuring, I said, son of a gun. And so after cursing for about 10 minutes, I said, okay, all right, you got that out of your system. Now, what the hell are you going to do? And so I gave myself an IV push of magnesium, and that knocked it out. Brought me right back. And then later on, I had another situation where it recurred after I took some EDTA and caused a detox. So I hit it with the magnesium again. And then this time I went on 3 packets a day, and it's been this way for over 6 months now. 3 packets a day of the Live On Labs liposomal encapsulated magnesium a day. Every day, every day, every day. And I haven't had a single extra beat since then. Now, I don't think you can find 2 people on the planet that have actually had atrial fibrillation, clear and solid, have it resolved, and then you can show on Holter monitor that there's never again any more extra beats. Okay, that's virtually unheard of.
Any recommendations on how much magnesium or what form? Because it comes in a whole bunch of forms.
Well, as much as you can. Okay, really, orally you can't overdo the magnesium. All right, intravenously you can take too much that will drop your blood pressure and have other effects. But there never needs to be worry about magnesium toxicity by taking it orally, unless you're like an 85-year-old person, extremely constipated, and it all just collects inside the gut and never goes out. That's the one crazy circumstance. But for regular folks, you can't overdo oral magnesium. Your bowels will shut you down before that, just like they will with vitamin C. I mean, how do they clean you out for a colonoscopy? Magnesium citrate. Okay, so now, having said that, then what you want to first try to decide for yourself: am I mildly or severely magnesium deficient? So, if you check your pulse from time to time, and this, that, and the other, you never have extra beats, you're going to be in the mild category, all right? And you don't have to go crazy. On the other hand, if you have extra beats, you need to go crazy over the supplementation. Now, the ones that I recommend most, you have to remember too, with magnesium supplements, you have an anion and a cation, positive and negative. The positives are all magnesium. The anions are glycinate, citrate, ascorbate, malleate, threonate. I mean, all. And the thing is it's two different supplements in one. So you need to consider when you're trying to optimize the impact of a supplement. Yes, everybody needs the cation, the magnesium. Which of the anions does my patient or myself or my family member need the most? Okay. Some people can use a lot of glycine. Now, my recommendation to most people these days, when they say, if they're not going to take the liposome magnesium like I'm taking, is a little more costly, but it's easy to take. It really keeps your levels up. If you're not going to do that, and you're going to take another form of magnesium, my recommendation is magnesium chloride. Because there are other forms that are absorbed better, yes, but magnesium chloride gives you a great deal of added protection against pathogens. And we're still not completely out of our pandemic. And I'm afraid we're patiently waiting for our next one. And so it's very important that we get that we keep this level up. Why do I say that? Because, for example, the wonders of vitamin C. At the same time, Dr. Frederick Klenner in North Carolina cured 60 out of 60 cases of polio in babies, infants, and young children with injectable and oral vitamin C. And this is kind of incredible. At the same time, in France, there was a Dr. Nouveau who had 15 polio patients, some a little bit more advanced with partial paralysis, and he cured all of them with only oral magnesium chloride. Okay, so that's how powerful. And it's not, and it's the chloride that's making the difference. I say that because in this one incredible experiment where they looked at magnesium and viral cultures, they found that added magnesium chloride knocked the virus out completely, and that adding magnesium sulfate encouraged virus growth. So it's an important difference. I'm not saying don't take magnesium sulfate for your IV forms or whatever, but just remember that the anion matters. Okay, the anion matters. Maybe some of us have grandmothers or mothers who used to say you have a sore throat, gargle with salt water. Well, it's not the sodium that's doing it; it's the chloride. You know, you chlorinate a pool. Why? Okay, same sort of thing. You jump into the ocean, the salt water, and you have a little sore there. Stay in the water for about an hour, and it's clearing up. So chloride is very, very potent antipathogen.
Your other four were,
Oh yeah, okay.
they look, sorry, they look like mitochondrial boosters
That's
to me.
absolutely what they are. And the thing is, and I've been working with these, I call them Super 8 supplements for a couple of years now. And I haven't had any negative feedback at all. In fact, I've had people reporting on different seemingly unrelated syndromes just resolving or getting fantastically better, sudden hearing loss resolving. I mean, lots of crazy different things. But you have to remember what these supplements do is two things. The first four bring calcium levels down to normal or attempt to, and optimize intracellular vitamin C. And these other four optimize ATP production. Now, I don't think there's two more important things for a cell to have than normal vitamin C levels and optimal ATP production. That's pretty much it. The thing is so many people are talk about mitochondrial dysfunction these days. That's good. It's an important topic, but they're still missing the boat on what to do for it. All right. Now, most people that deal with mitochondria all know about the electron transport chain, which basically, and I'm really oversimplifying here, use the electrons that the glucose gets brought into your body, gets metabolized in the Krebs cycle, and brought down until you have electron donors going into the first step, which is NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Second stage, FAD, flavin. Third stage, coenzyme Q10. Fourth stage, cytochrome C oxidase. Now, we already know, or it's known, maybe all of us don't know it, that Dr. Abram Hoffer in the 1960s, using niacin or niacinamide, okay, with a little bit of vitamin C, but the main thing was the niacinamide, was able to completely cure most of his chronic schizophrenic patients. So that's how powerful niacinamide and niacin are, not in and of themselves, but in the fact that they're the primary precursor of NAD. So we hear lots and lots about NAD, and those are all good, but it's a much more too expensive way to do it. Taking NAD directly or taking any of these NAD derivatives. So anyway, that's just an example to show you how important one is. So the whole idea of this electron transport chain is fourfold. The first is you take, I recommend the niacinamide because so many people get the niacin flush and it turns them off and they just stop. I mean, I took personally one dose of niacin and I didn't get warm. I just burned on fire for an hour. And I said, they said, oh, you're going to get used to it in 2 weeks. I said, no way. I'm going to put up with this 2 more weeks. Okay, no way. So, I mean, that just, but the niacin does the job just as well for building up the NAD. So you take several grams and all of the doses can be upregulated. So you support the NAD. The next stage is FAD. Ironically enough, the primary precursor to flavin adenine dinucleotide is riboflavin, vitamin B2. And that you take 400 milligrams a day of. And this brings up another point too, because people talk about, well, I take a B complex and this, that, and the other, and I get all that. You're getting a microscopic dose. A usual B complex is going to give you about 3 or 4 milligrams of riboflavin. And I just told you you need 400 a day. All right. And then the next stage is coenzyme Q10, extremely important, probably the priciest of them. And a little is good and more is a lot better. So for people who are really low on their energy, I say get yourself in the 6, 7, 8, 900, 1 gram a day range of coenzyme Q10. And then the fourth stage, cytochrome C oxidase or B oxidase, I'm not sure, is guess what? Our buddy methylene blue comes in there. Methylene blue has a predilection not only for the brain and central nervous system, but a predilection for getting into the mitochondria with great ease. And it will directly donate an electron to the fourth stage, upregulate ATP production without the participation of the first three steps in any of the obligatory oxidative stress that any reaction causes. But anyway, the 4 anti-calcium plus the 4 pro-ATP, my goodness, people are dancing in the street. I mean, it's really, really, really a marvelous combination. And no, I don't sell them. I should, but I don't.
If we think about aging, particularly, would there be any other supplement that you would recommend, particularly for aging, apart from these 8, as we get older?
Yeah, high hydroxytyrosol content olive leaf extract. We mentioned earlier about hydroxytyrosol. Really, we have good evidence that it works. The only thing we don't have is, I mean, we did short-term studies, showed the vitamin C levels shoot up, but we don't have a lot of money to do a lot of research, so I can't tell you if that effect is sustained for a month or a year or 2 years or indefinitely. All I can tell you is they do have a clear response in nearly everybody that was given hydroxytyrosol to quickly and rapidly increase. I say vitamin C production. Some people like to say, oh, well, vitamin C levels in your blood, maybe you're mobilizing it. Well, there aren't any vitamin C stores in the body to be seriously mobilized. You have to be making.
Yes.
So I would say, and they make, what you do is you look for an olive leaf extract online, Amazon or someplace like that. You look at all the back labels and you want to take a dose. Most of them will tell you what percent of the product produces what amount of hydroxytyrosol. So you do your little mathematics, and you want to take whatever will give you 50 or more milligrams of hydroxytyrosol a day. It's a polyphenol, which is a group of substances that are, for the most part, highly beneficial. Possibly because many of them do the same thing. I don't know. Right. I would be surprised if hydroxytyrosol was the only polyphenol or the only nutrient that has this impact, but it's the one that we have documented.
So one other question. There was a trial, I think you referred to it a bit earlier, that showed that vitamin C extended it can't have been extended lifespan in humans.
Decreased all-cause mortality. Decreased all-cause mortality. Decrease your chance of dying from anything.
Do you remember what the dose was? Was it a dose, or
well, was in this case, it was even more elegant. They were just looking at blood levels, so and followed people on that. So no, I mean, different doses are going to give different blood levels for different people, obviously.
Right. So it was the blood level of vitamin C was positively correlated with lower mortality. Yes. Excellent. Okay, Dr. Levy, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to find out more information about yourself and your work, there's obviously all your books, which are available, I guess, everywhere on Amazon. And where else can people go for information?
Probably the best place is tomlevymd.com. TOMLEVYMD.com. All the books are there. All my articles are there. You see articles, and especially good at the bottom of the article is a long series of what's called orthomolecular medicine articles. And these are extensively researched, extensively referenced articles on the fact that root canals cause breast cancer, that heart failure is due to heavy metal concentrations in your heart, and things that are just really not recognized that are extremely important and can certainly turn the turned the corner for a lot of people if their health has become aware of it.
Yes, thank you. There were so many other things that we could have talked about, and it would have been good to.
Oh,
But maybe next time.
I can put on 2 or 3 day conferences. No, there's not a shortage of material for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Dr. Levy, thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Take care.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Yeah. Bye.